The Zyphar Empire had always been cautious when dealing with other species. They were not the strongest in the galaxy, nor were they the weakest. Their survival depended on careful diplomacy, strategic alliances, and knowing when to stay out of trouble. It was this mindset that had kept them from ever interfering in human affairs. The stories about humanity were strange, filled with contradictions. Some said they were aggressive, war-hungry beings who destroyed anything in their path. Others whispered that humans were fiercely loyal, willing to sacrifice everything for those they called allies. But no one in the galaxy truly understood them. That changed when a Zyphar patrol ship stumbled upon a dying planet at the edge of an uncharted system. The world was barren, its atmosphere barely breathable, and its surface littered with the wreckage of a crashed spaceship. At first, the Zyphar commander, Captain Celeran, had considered leaving immediately. There was nothing of value here. But then the distress signal came through. Weak, almost unreadable, but undeniably human. Celeran hesitated. Zyphar laws were clear. Do not interfere in the affairs of unknown species unless necessary. But as he watched the holographic display showing life signs, he made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. He ordered his crew to bring the humans aboard. There were only 20 survivors. They were weak, dehydrated, and suffering from injuries, but they were alive. As soon as they regained consciousness, they expressed their gratitude in a way that confused the Zyphar. One of them, a man named Lieutenant James Carter, simply smiled and said, "We owe you one." The Zyphar did not think much of it. They treated the humans' wounds, gave them supplies, and sent a message to Earth about the stranded crew. It took time, but eventually, a human ship arrived to take them home. The Zyphar thought that was the end of it. Just another day in the vast galaxy. Just another mission completed. Years passed. The incident was forgotten by most, until the Zyphar Empire found itself at the mercy of a force far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. The Tarlac Dominion was not interested in diplomacy. They were conquerors, destroyers of worlds. Their fleet moved through the Zyphar territories like a storm, leaving nothing but ruins behind. The Zyphar called for help. They pleaded with their allies, but no one wanted to challenge the Tarlac. The great empires of the galaxy simply watched, unwilling to risk their own security. The Zyphar High Council gathered in desperation, knowing that their civilization stood on the edge of destruction. That was when a message arrived. It was brief, consisting of only a few words. Request received. Help is on the way. UEF. The Zyphar were stunned. The humans were responding. They had no formal alliance, no treaty, no shared history beyond that one moment of kindness years ago. And yet, they were coming. Captain Celeran, now an admiral, stared at the message in disbelief. He remembered the words of Lieutenant Carter all those years ago. "We owe you one." It was then that he understood. Humanity had not forgotten. And now, the galaxy would witness what it truly meant when humans repaid a favor. The Zyphar homeworld, Valen Prime, was on the brink of collapse. The skies were filled with smoke, and the once thriving cities were now battlegrounds. The Tarlac Dominion had torn through the outer colonies, crushing any resistance. Now they stood at the doorstep of the Zyphar capital, ready to deliver the final blow. The Zyphar High Council had exhausted every option. They had pleaded with the Galactic Concord, but the so-called peacekeepers refused to interfere. The Valon Consortium, their supposed allies, had withdrawn their forces, unwilling to risk war. The Zyphar were alone. Their defenses were crumbling, their fleets scattered, and their people living in fear. Admiral Celeran stood in the war room, staring at the holographic display of enemy fleet movements. The Tarlac ships were massive, their jagged hulls designed for destruction. Every engagement ended the same way. Zyphar ships obliterated, planets burned, millions lost. The Tarlac did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They only conquered. A deep silence filled the war room. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The only question that remained was how long they had before the Tarlac finished what they started. Then, against all logic, against all expectations, the humans answered the distress call. The message from the United Earth Fleet, UEF, was short but clear. Hold the line. Reinforcements en route. ETA, 48 hours. The Sci-Fi were stunned. Every other species had abandoned them, yet the humans, the ones they had barely interacted with, were coming to their aid. And not just any fleet. The United Earth Fleet, the most mysterious and unpredictable military force in the galaxy. Rumors about Earth's fleet were endless. Some said their ships were outdated and barely functional. Others claimed they had weapons so advanced that no one dared to provoke them. The truth was that no one really knew what humanity was truly capable of, because in all recorded history, they had never fought a full-scale war with any major galactic power. Until now. Zelran's second-in-command, Commander Velik, narrowed his eyes at the message. "Do you really think they'll come?" he asked, his voice doubtful. Zelran stared at the glowing message one more time. The words were simple, yet there was a certainty in them that sent a chill down his spine. They wouldn't have responded if they weren't serious. Zelran said, "The humans are coming." Velik exhaled. "Then we have 2 days to survive." The Tarlac weren't waiting. Their massive warships had already begun positioning for the final attack. The Sci-Fi forces were outnumbered 20-1. Even if the humans arrived, there might not be anything left to save. But for the first time in weeks, Zelran felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Because if the rumors were true, if humanity's military was as dangerous as the stories claimed, then the Tarlac had made the worst mistake in their history. They had threatened a species that never forgot a debt. The sky over Valen Prime burned as the first wave of Tarlac warships descended. The planetary defenses struggled to hold, but the energy shields were already failing. Explosions rocked the capital, and the desperate voices of commanders echoed through the communication channels. Admiral Zelran stood on the bridge of the Sci-Fi flagship, the Valiants gripping the edges of the holotable. Red markers filled the display, enemy ships surrounding the planet like a pack of hungry beasts. The countdown was grim. The humans wouldn't arrive for another 24 hours. "We're not going to last that long," Commander Velik muttered, his mandibles clicking with frustration. Zelran knew he was right. The Sci-Fi fleet was on the verge of collapse. Their ships were outdated, their weapons ineffective against Tarlac armor. The defense grid had already fallen in 3 major cities. Every passing minute brought them closer to annihilation. And yet, the humans had said to hold the line. Zelran's mind raced. Why did the humans say 48 hours? They had never sent additional messages, no follow-up reports, no fleet positioning data. Just those simple words, hold the line. What if they weren't coming the way everyone expected? Before he could dwell on the thought, a Tarlac dreadnought began its descent. It was massive, larger than anything the Sci-Fi had ever faced. Plasma cannons fired relentlessly, ripping through the last planetary turrets. Then, the worst message came through the fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Dovak of the Tarlac Dominion. Your resistance is over. Surrender now, and we may grant mercy to your civilians." Zelran clenched his fists. He knew the Tarlac never granted mercy. It was a lie, a way to make their victory easier. Velik turned to him. "If we fight, we die. If we surrender, we die slower." Zelran exhaled sharply. No surrender, no retreat. The humans had said to hold the line. "All ships," he ordered. "Attack at will. We fight to the last." The Sci-Fi fleet launched a desperate counterattack. Fighters weaved through the battlefield, dodging plasma fire. The few remaining warships charged toward the dreadnought, cannons firing in every direction. Explosions erupted across the sky. But it was hopeless. One by one, Sci-Fi ships were torn apart. The battle was a massacre. Then, just as all seemed lost, a new signal appeared on the holotable. Unknown fleet detected. The Sci-Fi officers went silent. Even the Tarlac forces seemed confused. This wasn't a scheduled arrival. Then came the first transmission. This is Admiral Thorne of the United Earth Fleet. Stand by for immediate assistance. The humans had arrived, and they had brought hell with them. The first sign of the United Earth Fleet's arrival was a bright flash in the distance. It wasn't just the light of their ships. It was an explosion of energy. The Sci-Fi commanders on the bridge of the Valiant stared in disbelief as the new fleet emerged from hyperspace, their ships cutting through the vastness of space like a blade through cloth. They weren't just coming to help. They were arriving with unmatched power. The magnitude of the shockwave was unlike anything the Sci-Fi had ever seen. The lights on the bridge flickered from the force of the arrival, and the crew looked at each other, unsure of whether they should be terrified or elated. "Admiral," Velik said quietly, his voice filled with awe. What is this?" Zelleran couldn't answer. He watched as the human fleet continued to materialize. The ships were sleek, fast, and unlike anything in the galaxy. The markings on their hulls were unrecognizable, and the sheer size of the ships was overwhelming. Each of them was capable of destroying entire fleets on its own. But what struck Zelleran the most was the eerie calm with which they moved. The ships didn't hesitate. They didn't waver. They knew exactly what they were doing. The Tarlac, too, saw the new fleet. A ripple of panic spread through their ranks, and Zelleran could feel it. The Tarlac knew the humans. Everyone had heard the rumors about the Earth fleet, their reputation, their fearsome warriors, and their advanced technology. But nobody had ever seen them in action until now. Before anyone could react, the humans made their first move. A barrage of plasma torpedoes shot out from the nearest Earth vessel, and with terrifying precision, they slammed into a Tarlac destroyer. The ship didn't stand a chance. It exploded in a brilliant fireball, its remnants floating in the void. Zelleran's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to mediate like the Galactic Concord had. They were here to win. "Admiral, do we engage?" Velik asked, his voice tense. Zelleran hesitated. The Sci-Fi fleet had already been decimated, but with the humans arriving, there was a glimmer of hope. They needed to help. They needed to show the Tarlac that the Sci-Fi weren't alone. That Earth wasn't just helping. They were leading the charge. "Prepare to assist the humans," Zelleran ordered. "We fight together." But as he gave the command, the human fleet advanced without needing any direction. Their ships were swarming the Tarlac, cutting through their defenses with ease. It was as if they had been preparing for this fight for centuries, and the Tarlac were nothing more than a nuisance. One of the largest human ships, a massive battleship with a dark hull and glowing red accents, fired a devastating beam of energy. It hit a Tarlac flagship dead center, and the resulting explosion shattered the enemy ship into thousands of pieces. Zelleran's eyes widened. This wasn't a mere fleet. They were using weapons that could obliterate entire vessels with a single shot. The Tarlac didn't have anything like this. A voice crackled through the communications channel. It was Admiral Thorne again, calm and commanding. "Sci-Fi forces, engage at will. We'll take care of the rest. Follow our lead, and we'll end this." Zelleran could feel the weight of those words. The humans were in charge now. The Sci-Fi fleet, what little was left, would follow their every command. But there was something else, something even more profound. The humans were fighting for them, for a species they had never met, for a world they had no obligation to save. The Tarlac began to retreat. They had underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price. The humans were methodical, relentless. They didn't allow their enemies to regroup. The remaining Tarlac ships attempted to flee into deep space, but the Earth fleet had them cornered. They were done. The Sci-Fi had held their ground, but it was the humans who had delivered the decisive blow. And as the Tarlac forces retreated, leaving nothing behind but the wreckage of their warships, Zelleran couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. They were right. He muttered to himself. Humanity doesn't forget a debt. The Zephyr had called for help, and the humans had answered. But not just with ships or weapons. They had come with the fury of the universe itself, and in doing so, they had changed everything. Zelaren stood tall on the bridge, watching the last of the Tarlac ships warp out of sight. The battle was over, but the cost of this victory was unimaginable. However, as the silence fell over the bridge, one thing was clear. Humanity had just proven that when they owed you a favor, they didn't just pay it back. They made sure you would never forget. The battlefield was eerily silent now. The wreckage of Tarlac warships floated in the void, some still burning from the human fleet's relentless assault. The Zephyr, battered and exhausted, could only watch in stunned silence. Admiral Xelren stood at the command deck of the Valiants, his gaze fixed on the human ships. They had fought with ruthless precision, crushing the Tarlac forces without hesitation. And yet, even now, they weren't celebrating. They were scanning the battlefield, ensuring no Tarlac ship survived to regroup. A voice broke the silence over the comms. Admiral Thorn. Zephyr forces, your sector is secure. Do you require assistance with survivors? Zelaren hesitated before responding. We have suffered heavy losses, but we will manage. Thank you, Admiral. Thorn's voice remained calm. You're welcome, but this isn't over yet. Zelaren frowned. What do you mean? There was a pause. Then, a different human officer's voice came through, tense and urgent. New readings coming in. We're detecting an incoming Tarlac reinforcement fleet. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Zelaren's blood ran cold. The Tarlac had more forces on the way. How many ships? How heavily armed? The Zephyr fleet was already devastated. They had nothing left to fight with. Velik, his second-in-command, turned to him, panic in his eyes. Admiral, we don't have the strength for another battle. We can't hold out against another wave. Zelaren felt the weight of those words. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Admiral Thorn's voice came through again, unshaken, unfazed. Stand down, Admiral Zelaren. Let us handle this. Zelaren's mind raced. The Tarlac reinforcements could wipe them all out, yet Thorn sounded like it was nothing. How could the humans be so confident? Did they have more ships waiting? More weapons hidden? Then it hit him. They had never seen the full extent of the human fleet. The first fleet had arrived, but that didn't mean it was all they had. Zelaren swallowed. How many forces do you have? There was a pause. Then Thorn's voice came back, calm, firm, and terrifyingly confident. Enough. A chill ran through Zelaren. He turned back to the view screen, watching the human fleet reorganize. They weren't panicking. They weren't even preparing to retreat. They were waiting. And the way they waited sent shivers down Zelaren's spine. The Tarlac reinforcements were coming. They thought they were about to turn the tide of battle. They had no idea what they were walking into. The Zephyr fleet drifted in silence, their ships battered, their crews exhausted. The Tarlac reinforcements were approaching fast. An entire war fleet. The Zephyr had nothing left to fight with. But the humans did. Admiral Zelaren stared at the data streaming onto his display. 143 Tarlac warships, cruisers, dreadnoughts, even an Annihilator-class battleship, a vessel so powerful it had wiped out entire colonies before. This was no mere skirmish force. This was an execution squad. And yet, the humans remained unmoved. Admiral Thorn's fleet hovered in formation, their warships dark against the void, waiting. Zelaren swallowed hard and opened a channel. Admiral Thorn, there are too many of them, even your fleet. Thorn cut him off with a calm, unreadable tone. We know. Zelaren felt frustration rise. Then we must retreat. A pause. Then Thorn's voice came through, ice cold and final. We don't retreat. A shiver ran down Celeran's spine. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 5-1. Yet they weren't running. They were ready. The Sci-Fi admiral turned toward his second-in-command, Velik. What are they planning? Velik's eyes remained fixed on the human fleet. I don't know, sir. But they're too calm. A new transmission came through, this time from the Tarlek fleet. A deep, guttural voice filled the bridge. This is Supreme Commander Relicor of the Tarlek Empire. Sci-Fi forces, your surrender is accepted. We will spare your civilians. Stand down immediately. Celeran's hands clenched into fists. He had fought too hard to simply bow his head now. But his fleet was crippled. The Sci-Fi couldn't survive another battle. He had no choice. His mouth opened, but before he could speak, Admiral Thorn did. You have one chance, Relicor. Turn your fleet around. Silence. Then laughter. Mocking, amused laughter. Who dared speak to me that way? Thorn's response was calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly direct. Earth's first fleet. The laughter stopped. A long silence followed. Then Relicor spoke, his tone shifting from amusement to confusion. Earth. Humans. Thorn's voice remained steady. Yes. A pause. Then, for the first time, there was hesitation in the Tarlek's voice. Your forces are outnumbered. Thorn chuckled. Not in fear, not in nervousness, but as if the fight was already over. Check your long-range sensors, Relicor. Celeran frowned, quickly scanning his own. His heart nearly stopped. The human fleet was not alone. They hadn't been waiting because they were unprepared. They had been waiting for the rest of their forces to arrive. Hundreds, no, thousands, of new human warships were materializing from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight. A second wave, a third, a fourth. The battlefield that had once been a Tarlek victory had just turned into a trap. And the humans had sprung it. Relicor's voice returned, this time with something Celeran had never thought he'd hear from a Tarlek warlord. Fear. Impossible. Thorn's response was almost amused. You wanted a war, Relicor. A pause. Then Thorn's voice hardened. Now you have one. The Tarlek fleet had been caught in a storm they never saw coming. Waves of human ships poured into the battlefront, each one more formidable than the last. Hundreds of advanced warships, powered by technology so alien and devastating that even the Tarlek had no hope of understanding it. It was as if the humans had been holding back all along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Admiral Celeran stood frozen, his heart racing as he watched the incoming fleet on his screen. He had thought that they were finished, that this was the end for the Sci-Fi. But now, facing the full might of the human military, he realized that the real fight was just beginning. The Tarlek forces, once so confident in their superiority, were now scattered, their ships desperately trying to regroup as the humans closed in from all sides. The overwhelming force of the humans' attack was almost impossible to comprehend. It didn't take long for the battle to shift into full chaos. The first volley from the human fleet shattered the Tarlek's outer defenses with ease. Their energy shields were little more than a formality, barely able to withstand the barrage of human weaponry. Ships exploded into fragments, and the remnants of the Tarlek fleet scattered like leaves in the wind. Admiral Thorn's voice came over the comms again, his tone as cold and confident as ever. Admiral Celeran, your forces are finished. You have two choices, surrender or be destroyed. Celeran clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on the strength of the Sci-Fi military. But against this unstoppable human force, there was nothing they could do. We will fight to the last. Celeran shouted in defiance, but even as the words left his lips, he knew they had no real meaning anymore. The Tarlek had been outclassed. Their entire strategy had relied on overwhelming force, but the humans had outpaced them in every way. The battle raged on, but it was clear. The end was inevitable. The Tarlek ships, broken and battered, continued to fall under the relentless assault of the human fleet. Then, as if on cue, the humans launched a final devastating offensive. Massive ships, each brimming with weaponry, moved in formation to deliver a crushing blow to the Tarlak's heart. The destruction was swift and brutal, with no room for mercy. And then, it was over. Zellerin stood silent, staring at the screen as the Tarlak flagship, the massive Annihilator-class ship, was reduced to nothing more than a cloud of debris. The remaining Tarlak vessels scattered, some attempting to flee, others surrendering. The humans had won. But what Zellerin couldn't shake was the realization of just how much they had underestimated Earth's forces. As he surveyed the wreckage, he thought of the words that had echoed through his mind ever since that first transmission from Admiral Thorne. "You wanted a war. Now you have one." He had thought those words were just a threat, a warning. But the humans had meant them. And as the remnants of the Tarlak fleet drifted aimlessly in the void, Zellerin couldn't help but feel a terrifying sense of dread for what was to come. Because now the entire galaxy knew the truth about humanity, and Earth had just made it clear they were no longer to be underestimated. In the aftermath, as the last of the Tarlak ships vanished into hyperspace, Admiral Thorne's voice came through again, final and commanding. "Mission complete. Humanity stands victorious." The human fleet, once thought of as a minor player in the vastness of the galaxy, had just reshaped the entire balance of power. And every species across the stars would remember the day the humans showed what they were truly capable of. For the first time, the universe understood. Humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. They were a force that would never be forgotten.